human civilization has resided within a protective membrane. We have functioned entirely inside a managed reality. The structures that once held our consensus together are under external pressure they were never built to withstand. This isn't a random decay. Two specific, unmanaged disruptions are converging on our reality at the same time. The first disruption is the autonomous, exponential rise of advanced artificial intelligence. The second disruption is the growing pressure for UAP and NHI disclosure. These two forces are colliding on the same timeline. While AI enables the public to analyze sensor data and historical records at scale, the legal and political pressure for disclosure is reaching a breaking point. A strategy of controlled disclosure cannot survive in an AI-augmented civilization. The ability to keep secrets is being outpaced by the ability to find them. As the glass cracks, human civilization finds itself suddenly exposed to an environment it is not yet prepared to navigate. For the first time, our intelligence is meeting a plural set of other intelligences across different substrates, silicon and beyond. We encounter a call for cosmic coherence, a life that actually makes sense inside the context of the universe as it is, not as it was presented to us. Whether this transition destroys our fabric or elevates our relationship with reality depends on our willingness to face the multi-intelligence frontier today.
Welcome, everyone, to the first AI NHI Summit at the State of the World Forum. My name is Georg Boch, and I'm the founder of the strategic initiative on the convergence of artificial intelligence and non-human intelligence. The core team here with me today who is driving this work is Katie Hurley and Prasad, both two AI technologists who are deeply aware of NHI, and they've been truly instrumental in shaping this from the very beginning. In fact, we introduced this strategic initiative for the first time last year at the State of the World Forum. But today, at this very first summit of ours, I'm also joined by further voices who I have learned to deeply respect. Sarah Gamm, who has a background in the intelligence world, David Hooper, who is a technologist and who has one of the very first UAP startups, but also Eric Hahn, who has a very distinct background in financial services in a top Wall Street firm. So together, we have been meeting regularly over the last weeks and months to figure out what this summit should be about. And we thought it would be good to share this conversation, one of these conversations that we had in private with the interested public, because I believe it's important that this subject matter is not discussed only in skiffs behind closed doors, but we create a kind of public platform for these subject matters to be discussed. Especially because I personally believe that it's really important to bring more people from this world of artificial intelligence on board with what's happening in the world of UAP and NHI disclosure in research. I think there are many overlaps, as we will see today, many shared problems and challenges, and there's a lot of opportunity space for cross-pollination and advance. But what I've experienced when I contacted many AI experts and industry leaders in the field who are even aware of UAP disclosure was their statement that, George, I would love to be part of this, but this is a very sensitive subject. There's a lot of writing for me professionally on this. And the idea that artificial intelligence is too closely associated with non-human intelligence may be dicey for me. So I want to thank Sarah, David, Eric, Katie, and Deep, who are here with us today, because of their courage to speak to this very potentiated subject matter, to say the least. And I've also been walking around my neighborhood today and was thinking, how could we start this conversation from square one, right? How could you try to explain to somebody who's not too much into this why we're having this conversation? That's always a good starting point. Like, what's the most simple way of putting this, in other words? And what I kind of landed on is, and we can discuss this later, but what I landed on is simply the fact that the people who are building the most powerful AI systems on Earth right now, and the people who are investigating the UAP phenomenon, have strangely started to use the same term called non-human intelligence. And at this point, nobody is quite sure who means what anymore. I think at least that's the case. So let me kick this off maybe with briefly sharing one or two slides, and then I'll transition directly to Sarah to see how she can speak from her professional experience on the matter. So first things first, I'm not suggesting, we're not suggesting, and all the slides you're going to see today are a first attempt of making sense of this, right? These are not final statements, monolithic statements. This is more created in the idea of truth pursued, not possessed. But the point I'm making is, we're not saying that AI and NHI are the same thing. But I think there's a very good case to be made that, in fact, they represent very similar challenges. So what do I mean by similar challenges? At the State of the World Forum, we have had the theme of 4 intelligences, 1 future. And we've spoken to this kind of Copernican shock that we are undergoing right now as humanity, because we're realizing that human intelligence is really not at the center of the universe, the way we thought it was during modernity, for example. What do we mean by that? We have this pressure from below, in the sense what we're building ourselves, AI, and the assumption and the capabilities of AI that make the assumption that human intelligence is unique, kind of obsolete. And from above, by what we're learning through whistleblowers and people like Jay Stratton or Gary Garash in documentaries like Age of Disclosure, this very clear statement that humanity is not alone, that there's growing evidence that can hardly be ignored. But that is not all, right? What I was saying before, the really weird thing is that we have this term now being used in both domains, and it's not quite sure who means what. Eric Schmidt, for example, at Davos, he mentioned there in an AI conversation that a non-human intelligence has arrived. It can't be stopped. It's a competitor. What we choose now will echo for thousands of years. And that, of course, seems like he's talking about an alien invasion, but in fact, he's just talking about, AI, I believe. Then we have famous words, those of Carnell, where at SALT 2023, I believe, stated non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. And it seems a bit confounding, a bit ambiguous that this term non-human intelligence is used in both domains. And one of the things I would like to do today with all of you guys is to unpack that, so we get more of a clear sense what's behind this convergence. And there is, of course, also, as you may know, the attempt to define what non-human intelligence is in the NDAA, at least in one of the drafts of the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Act. And there it was defined as any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of ultimate origin, that is presumed responsible for the unidentified anomalous phenomenon, meaning UAP, meaning UFOs. So this is, in my humble opinion, would be a great moment to bring in Sarah with us, because Sarah actually worked at the UAP task force for the Department of Defense, as it was called back then. And well, many things I would want to ask you about this, but like this assessment of non-human intelligence being responsible for the UAP phenomenon, right? Or what we call UFO. Like, based on your personal assessment of having worked in that task force, is that something, do you think that NHI is behind the UAP phenomenon?
Yes. I mean, you kind of, my next thought is another question is who else would be behind it, who's steering, and we know we're not alone, but we don't know where they're from. So absolutely, yes.
And I believe, like, could you briefly describe like what it was like working in this task force? You know, like, did you see some video material that would astonish the public? Do you think there's a big gap between what we've seen, like in the New York Times, as evidence in what you have seen? Is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, I can't speak to everything, right? And I'm not an official whistleblower, so I haven't gone through the protocols and stuff that others, because I'm not speaking bad about the government or fraud, waste, and abuse. So I wanted to make that clear. So but yeah, we have so much more than what the public is aware about, and there's still some things that are unknowns that we just don't have enough data. This is of course many years ago. So as of many years ago when I was on the task force, we have so much more data, and a lot of it is still unknown. So we just need more data or to duplicate it, right? Because it is a science-based analysis, and but there's so much that I truly believe can be released that the public could see, that is unidentified. It is pretty incredible what we have been able to get, and more people, when they're looking up, including pilots, folks are getting a little bit more brave as the stigma is decreased and reporting more now. So that's actually been pretty neat witnessing that over the past few years, the major pivot and the change of the stigma decreasing.
Would you say that there has also been kind of a growing conviction in your community, at least, that what is being observed, like what all these whistleblowers are observing, is in fact not some kind of adversary technology? That's the term that's often being used. Like, can you speak to what you've seen in this video material that has grown your conviction that this is like non-human technology?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. A couple of people like Lou Elizondo has talked about the 5 observables, and it is to me, like a requirement to go through once you see a video or once you see an object. You, of course, you want more data, but you look at the direction it's flying, and you start thinking, is that parallax? Is something closer to you moving at a different speed than something further away? And then you go through kind of like the Rolodex of things, but then you all of a sudden, maybe, like, let's say you're watching a video and the object suddenly stops. And so the video pans off screen because it's been tracking the object, so it has to go back. It might accelerate or make a sudden movement somewhere else. So G forces that we ourselves in our human bodies would not be able to sustain or what's the word I'm looking for? Withstand. And so you see things that make very quick, sudden movements. And then also sometimes objects change shape a little bit.
Wow. Okay. And this term non-human intelligence. There is a way of looking at it that's very sanitized, right? It's very abstract.
Yeah.
But to many people in the community that has been tracking this for 80 years almost now, there's this other aspect that has to do more with the experience of an other, of something that is real, like in very experiential sense. Is that something that's relevant for you in understanding non-human intelligence, or how would you frame that for you? Like,
Yeah, I was going to ask you to try to clarify. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So, for example, there's been a lot of talk about biologics. There's all this UAP lore around that, right? I've heard that you had experiences with Chris Bledsoe. You saw orbs. What I'm looking for is like, is there anything from what you have experienced that gives you the sense that there is another intelligence there that's trying to communicate, like, or does it just feel to you like it is some kind of purely technological thing flying around?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So, yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought up Chris Bledsoe's, what I've been able to see with him. So I was a part of a small group of people on Capitol Hill that got to see orbs above the Capitol building the night before the hearing, the UAP hearing last year in September. And I ended up, I guess just feeling the energy from it. And I got so much joy and so much happiness. And it was pretty incredible to see these orbs that, I've heard Chris talk about for years. And some of my friends that have been with him as well have had these experiences, and they go transmedium. They'll go from water to air. And I haven't been there with him for that. And then seeing it above the Capitol building in light pollution and making maneuvers that there's no way it could happen, and then getting the feeling from them of joy, and it felt like playfulness. And I mean, they knew we were there, and it was the night before an amazing hearing that happened in September last year. So yes, there is something driving behind the seat, and something is there and trying to say hello.
Wow. Yeah, what I find fascinating, Sarah, is that you've both been in this place where you saw a lot of objective data on the reality of this, but also you've ventured into putting yourself in a place where you would have personal experience of it. And I think that's very unique, and it's very important to have more perspectives on it. So like a last question for me would be, before we go later to the main panel, did you also see something like the orbs that Chris is describing at the UAP task force?
The UAP task force, so that's a good question. Some of the data did appear to be more orb-like, but that's because of the poor quality of sensors. So everyone always complains about they want more data and they want better quality data. Well, people on the inside complain about that too. And so we actually, when the pandemic shutdown happened, a lot of us were trying to pull together a spreadsheet of ideas of where money should go for sensors, where we should put them and everything. And then the pandemic happened, and the task force, eventually got disbanded. Well, it wasn't soon after that, but like subjectively. And then Arrow was stood up. So a lot of the things that we were trying to pull together just didn't happen. So yes, I got to see some orbs, but that was more of the unreliable data of what it was, because that orb could and I'm referring to like a FLIR, so thermal imaging camera. So there's big pixel values, right? So you could have 3 pixels that might be multiple meters big. So you don't know if that little orb is a big bird or maybe a balloon or something like that. So yes, the direct answer, I have seen orbs, but I would say that data would have been inconclusive in the systems and the data that I got to see.
Okay. Well, as we transition to David, I would like to ask you, like, what is your sense of how this has changed you as a person, being exposed, to this data, both in an official function, but also in a personal note? Like,
I love that. I think it's challenged me more than what I thought, because I never ever thought I would be a public figure saying we're not alone, and I've seen classified data. So it has been challenging in that way, but it has, I think, brought amazing people on my path, and to know for sure, like 100%, high confidence of what I've been able to see behind, the brick wall, behind the green door, that we're not alone. It has been, life changing, because that has dominoed into different experiences, some that I haven't said public before, face-to-face encounters with things, and people that I've met that have shared things with me and shared photos and videos. And so I would say my life feels pretty fortunate to be in the seat that I am.
Wow. Okay. We'll leave it at that for now, but we'll return. Right. David, thank you for being here. So I'm going to introduce David briefly because, just to summarize what we heard from Sarah worked at the DoD UAP task force. She looked at the data of these UAPs that behave under different laws of physics that we can reproduce with our technology right now. This is called the 5 observables. But even she said that the data wasn't as good as it should have been. And that was even while she worked, at the Department of Defense. I have with me today David Hooper, who is building a UAP startup that is, you could say, democratizing this type of data gathering, making it possible for these billion-dollar sensors, these capabilities, to eventually end up in civilian hands, like very soon. And the reason I'm bringing you in, David, is because I believe, when we talk about readiness, NHI readiness, your startup is kind of in a very different category, because it allows people like you and me to take this science, this new science, into our own hands eventually. Can you talk to what your vision is for your company and how you ended up doing this?
Yes. Well, thank you, George, for the introduction. So that's exactly why I built ELDÆON and started the company, is to close that sensor gap that we're even seeing happening within government and the military. When you synchronize optical, infrared, passive radar, and atomic clock precision, you can start separating those artifacts that Sarah's talking about from true anomalies. You not only need multiple sensors, but high quality sensors to be able to make sense of the data. So the goal is to make that kind of analysis accessible to everyone, civilians, researchers. So it's not just in classified programs at the government. And really, with the vision of my company, is to stop what happened with the UAV drone upbringing of that technology that happened between 2015 to 2025. Because we've seen this story play out before with drones, like traditional quadcopters. What started as billion-dollar defense tech became consumer grade within the decade. And we're seeing this happen in the Ukraine-Russian scenario, right? And what that led to, that shift, it completely changed who could collect aerial data, right? We're doing the same for UAP detection. So my vision for the future is to not allow this division between, only some people can get the data and some people can't. I don't want to see that same thing happen with regards to UAPs. So we need to be able to give the ability to just everyday people to have access to the tech. And there's a way to do that responsibly without pushing the frontier too fast. because you're obviously going to come up with roadblocks such as ITAR. Hey, we're giving some advanced technology to consumers. What does that mean for national security? So we really want to be proactive about doing this the right way. And so that's what my vision of the company in the future is to give that technology to people, but do it in a way that's responsible.
Just to make this more tangible and real to people, like I met David at the Seoul conference in Italy. He brought his tech with him. It's like a Pelican case you can travel with pretty easily. And what's the price point on that box? Like,
yeah, so the unit
just
that
to give this
saw,
a reality for people so they have an understanding of what we're talking about here.
yeah, we have two different models that we sell. We have a higher tier system called Dionysus, which has over 28 sensors on board. That's for like research lab, government, law enforcement. And then we have a lower cost system that's just one particular product, which is passive radar. That's called Nemesis. The lower cost system is $500. People can buy that now. And it gives people the operational capacity to collect real radar data, which usually they've only been able to get from the FAA or from the military, right? FOIL requested. But now that you can just buy this system from us, everyone can know if there's something flying overhead and know its flight pattern, right? Was it weird? Was it anomalous? We can see that now.
Yeah, and it's so important to understand that this is possible because of the Silicon Revolution, because of Moore's Law, because of AI also being used to then make sense of that data in the end, right? And well, you could even have your own AI model running, locally to make sense of that data probably at some point. So I just want to point out the fact how this empowers people to, investigate this in a way that without this AI revolution, tech revolution would not be possible. So this is a theme we will revisit later on, because it seems as if it will become structurally more and more impossible to keep up this secrecy around the investigation of UAP and NHI as technology progresses. So there needs to be an exit strategy, right? We're looking at, in the summit, trying to understand if this exit strategy is kind of orchestrated, or if it's like somehow up for civilization, we're just observing it. And that's why I want to bring in now, Deep, because he is somebody who first really came to my attention when he really kind of did something unheard of as a technologist. He did the first UAP hackathon last year in San Francisco, where he applied kind of what, coders would do to come up with new innovative solution to the space of UAP. And I thought that was really just a very bold move that really put you on my passive radar. And ever since then, we've been in contact, and we're now working together on this strategic initiative. So, people should know about Deep, that he, is very much involved in quantum computing. Or he sold his quantum computing company in his 20s, I believe, and like what we would probably call a Wunderkind in German. But he's also very much into this NHI stuff, this UAP stuff. And there are very few people who are willing to put this kind of skin into the game. So I want to applaud you, Deep, and David for doing that. I think we represent a new generation that is not willing to, compartmentalize this any further. And so maybe just because what's happening in AI, like very few other people, could you just speak to this term of non-human intelligence, like to the average Opus 4.6 user, like supposedly the best AI model we can have right now as enterprise users? Like, what's going on in these frontier AI labs that inspires people like Eric Schmidt to talk about non-human intelligence? Like, what are we missing here?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I want to thank you for the beautiful introduction, Georg. Appreciate it. And I think, it's been a super awesome. I want to give credit to the Soul Foundation. We, I met David in person through the Soul Foundation, which was fantastic. And it sounds like, you did too. So that's great. That's a super connector of an organization. And it's been a wonder and honor to just like see a lot of, people in the community, David included, yourself included, just like converge on ideas and spread them and grow them. So yeah, with that being said, sorry about that. But when it comes to Eric Schmidt, because I want to lock in on that, I think that's probably worth honing in on. And what I think we're seeing is ontological convergence. That's what I would describe this phenomenon, where two entirely different human beings and groups of people with different ontologies, different substrates of reality, right? The UFO community is not necessarily dealing with GPUs, transformer architectures, gating, mass gating mechanisms, figuring out how to optimize an attention head, mechanistic interpretation, AI safety, alignment, regulatory policy, right? Like that's Eric Schmidt's world. And then on top of that, the quantum AI stuff. And then on the UFO community side, that's raw, what I would call like ontological experiential information. So
there's also the political side of this. Let's not forget that one, right?
Like, that is now very real since 2017. Great point. So right, and so that's forcing. I'm glad you brought that up. That's forcing this ontological convergence where literally you have two different bodies of people dealing with clearly a non-human intelligence. There's convergence there. I want to bring up this fact. So AI today, a lot of people make jokes. AI should actually stand for alien intelligence, and I fully agree with that, because ultimately every time you're talking to Sonnet or Claude, like any model of Claude, any GPT, what you're getting is a set of GPUs mimicking human language, right? Its inherent geometry is not biological. The surface is language, right? It's tokens that are compressed into two-dimensional characters that we can understand. However, the underlying cognition is far more alien. It's mixture of experts. It's routing models. It's attention heads, right? Attention mechanisms. It's the embedded vectors. It's the various different like loss functions that went into the different architecture decisions. This is very, very different kind of cognition. It's based on latent structures rather than felt human intuition. So while we're talking to something that speaks English, it is absolutely not thinking in English. It doesn't think like a human necessarily, but it does converge on human thinking because it's been trained on human data. So that is the singular difference, I would say, between AI and like, let's say, truly non-terrestrial intelligence.
I like that term. I like that term a lot. NTI.
Much love, brother.
Oh. Okay, I think, that's a very good point you're making there, and we will revisit that a bit later in some of the slides, or we'll try to surmise what you guys have been saying. And but I also want to kind of hone into this point that you're very much involved in what you could call AI physics. I mean, it's a new term. Could you just briefly like unpack, like, let me show the slide that we talked about earlier. Maybe that will make it easier. I've been trying with folks to come up with slides that would make what we're talking about easier to digest, because it's really important for us that it's not just talking heads. And so, like, we've heard from Sarah before, these demonstrations of UAPs moving in ways that don't behave the way they should if they have our technology. There's something these NHIs know about physics that we don't. And so they demonstrate in a way what frontier science is trying to reach, like even today with the help of physics AI. Can you speak to that, like, so people understand this connection?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Essentially, the way that I would think about it is that all intelligence whether they evolved on Earth based on, again, like environmental pressures that we were born into, or whether they were born in Andromeda or Alpha Centauri or some other star system. Essentially, every single intelligence, if we stick to the just purely materialist, reductionist, right, definition of life. So I'm going to purposely, right, like compartmentalize the theological discussions and the immaterial aspects of all this. And within that perspective, biological life can be thought of as thermodynamically irreducible boundaries. And if we can think of biological life as thermodynamic irreducible boundaries, we can extend that definition further. Life is not just a thermodynamical irreducible boundary, which already is insane, right? It means that you can't reduce it. It means that it can't just disintegrate into matter or ashes or something nonsensical. We're negentropy, right? We take chaos and turn into order. And that process of taking chaos into order is thanks to this irreducible thermodynamic and boundary or gradient that all biological systems have in common. Now, that was true until about 2023, 2022. Now there is a new form of irreducible thermodynamic boundaries that exist that is also capable of thinking of itself and thinking about itself, modeling itself in the world, right? That's artificial intelligence. The most advanced transformer architectures we have today are also quite literally in the most physics-like sense of the word, thermodynamically irreducible boundaries, where you have hundreds of thousands of GPUs, you have warehouses, fluorescent light bulbs, engineers, people, human beings, energy, money, free energy influx constantly, managing a negentropic gradient. So when we think about this new form of intelligence, between like what would be in common between, let's say, a super intelligent life form, let's say speculatively 1 billion years more advanced than human beings, right? Like, let's say they cracked AGI and physics-based AI, at least, 9 figures ago, potentially more. What would they have in common? Well, we literally could not be able to guess based on unique, like direct effects. We can only guess based on topology of the thinking. So what that means I'll cut to the chase here because I think there's a very deep conversation to be had. All intelligence will realize at one point that it must persist in the world in order to achieve its goals. And every intelligence will determine its own way of what persistence in the world means. That is an artist, that is a philosopher, that is an AI system deciding what self-preservation looks like for itself. That's a non-human intelligence that evolved in Andromeda billions of years ago, right? So when we think about physics from that perspective, I think what we can expect when we're evaluating non-human intelligence is that they will develop the ability to understand physics and model the world just like we did out of self-preservation. So that's all I would want to say for that.
Okay, well, I think we'll visit that later. Definitely worth pondering because it kind of makes you appreciate like what is the language of intelligence, like independent of substrate, like, you know,
Absolutely.
it seems like we're have very bad intelligence on the nature of intelligence at this point, but at the same time we have to deal with it from many different angles. So we'll revisit your aspects later. I'm gonna introduce Katie Hurley now, part of our initiative, because you know Katie, like you, also is very much. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
Very much. You know, working in Silicon Valley and has her finger on the pulse of what's kind of going on over there, what's being discussed in these rooms, where decisions are being made that affect people globally. And also, you know, you're someone who thinks of artificial intelligence not just in a purely engineering product way, like you do when you consult with AI companies and quantum computing companies, but you also really much, I think, have your very good sense of what it means from a human perspective and what the larger societal implications are. So after kind of having laid out the facts, the technological facts with, Sarah, David, and Deep, maybe we should speak to that a little bit. Like, what do you feel is on the horizon in this AI NHI convergence?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can only speak for the timeline that we've been on right now, right? But this is one of the most impactful times to be alive, essentially, in humanity. And we can all kind of understand just from a animalistic perspective what that feels like. At the end of the day, survival is humans' biggest driver. It's one of our biggest drivers. And as we introduce new technologies, we have to learn how to coexist with them. And something I love to talk about is our own natural internal technology. And so typically I like to just kind of shoot from the heart. But yesterday, when I was reflecting on what was important to share, I jotted down some quick notes. I did not use AI for this.
Very good.
And I'm going to pull a little switch on us, Georg, and actually just read this because I think it will allow us to kind of dive into some things when we go into our panel.
Please.
It'll take me about like 2 minutes. Okay. So the natural and synthetic world is evolving and changing before our eyes. NVIDIA just announced Cosmos 3, a pioneering world foundation model that advances physical AI with synthetic world generation, vision reasoning, and action simulation, and other innovations like GeForce Now to create more realistic gaming. We are showing that AI and machines can replicate our physical and digital worlds. We can see this as an opportunity to coexist amidst machines, but it also elicits a threat to our species. We have to address what it means to be human at the deepest level. We have been pouring into our external world, producing rising GDP, and striving to move forward. Now we have AI. AI is that forward motion, that multiplier, but it is non-biological, it is synthetic, it is silicone, and it exhibits our attributes. We actually have over 30 senses. It's not just our 5. We have super senses. We ask AI to predict our future or to reason through scenarios. But we also only use at most 10% of our brains. This is an opportunity to learn from AI, to take what we admire about AI and use it to inform and instruct how we move forward into the world. If cognition becomes sharper with AI, what does that mean for us as we primarily use that as our index and marker for success? But what about things like our heart or our gut? We have several internal intelligence systems that we need to fine-tune. And what if there is more? What if this deep-rooted natural intelligence that exists innately within us is just the tip of the iceberg? What are the true sources guiding human destiny? And are we being shown a path to evolution that's more biologically friendly? And is this perhaps a dynamic that's being played out with non-human intelligence? What if there were new energies we could merge with to enhance our operating system? Just like we upgrade our technology, what about us? What are we doing to upgrade our natural technology? And perhaps the nuts and bolts side of UAP is gifting us technology as well and allowing paths to run in parallel with deeper investment into our material world and in the tangential metaphysical world. And what if humans are simply data nodes ourselves? Who is studying us? Human to AI relationship is a metaphor for NHI to human relationship, both existing on different hierarchies. But what are the lessons that NHI wants us to learn? The only way is through. We must accept what it means to be human in order to elevate, which means challenges and strife could lie ahead before we see an entirely new way of being and existing waiting for us. Thank you for letting me read that. It was longer than I anticipated.
There's a lot in there. It's really a lot in there. What I'm hearing is this opportunity, this invitation of this moment in time to really reconsider and reappreciate what it actually means to be human. And because we now have these machines that can reason or that have cognition, whatever that means. So we really can't define ourselves by that anymore. I think that's a fundamental shift or identity crisis, ultimately an opportunity to connect to more ways of knowing that are also possible for us. And what is your sense of what's happening in Silicon Valley around that? Do you think this conversation is happening?
The most interesting thing I come across when you meet with someone who's pretty high up at one of the labs, I've had this happen a few times where I've been in a coffee shop and asking some questions, and they say, hey, when we get back to like a private space, I can't go into full detail, but I can give you kind of some emotional reaction to show you where things are headed a bit. And we see this many a times. There's a lot of times technology that remains behind closed doors because it needs to be introduced and instrumentized into our world at a pace that we can adopt it. And so we can imagine there's been AI breakthroughs that have been much more advanced than, we're seeing them now more, but even let's say 3 to 5 years ago that were in the background, but not necessarily in the foreground. And we're now at this moment where those things are being shown and utilized for a number of different reasons, some positive, some more negative. So it's different than it was like even just a year ago, I would say.
So what you're speaking to sounds almost like a controlled rollout. Is that?
Yeah, and I like to stay with like positive words because this is all positive, right? Like AI and technology is an evolution of humanity. But when we think about the convergence of how non-human intelligence comes in, it's like an opportunity to open our minds a bit more. We feel we're the creators of AI. We instrument it from like the ground up. So we build from the ground up. And what we've seen from the 5 observables from UAP technology, it's more ethereal. It shapeshifts. It comes into someone's life depending on their readiness and even probably genetics to a degree. And so if we're to pull in, I believe they're gifts of this new technology that's being shown to us, that's like a tops down motion. And what's interesting is we're now at this inflection point where we've gone bottom up. Now we're at the inflection point where AI is showing us that it's mapped to our intelligence level. So I think the integration point is how do we integrate these two technologies? But most importantly, perhaps this technology over here supersedes the AI technology if we open our minds to it.
Okay. Well, my experience in working on this strategic initiative on this summit with you and Deep and everybody else was definitely the sense of being asked to broaden my mind, and AI was instrumental in helping me do that. Like the amount of analysis I could do, the depth of research I was able to do was really pushing me, and it almost felt like starting to have an intuitive relationship with AI to some extent, where it feels as if there is something happening inside of you, at least, that switching a flipping a switch, and well, that's worth noting. So we'll move on now to Eric to bring more financial institutional knowledge to this conversation. Thank you so much, Katie. We will circle back. So I'm very happy to have Eric Hahn with me today. Eric Hahn is an executive director for firm-wide AI implementation at a major Wall Street firm. And he's speaking today here in personal capacity. And I met Eric also in Italy at the Seoul conference last year. And since then, we had a bunch of really good conversations where we were comparing notes on what we think is happening in this space and how, what we've heard so far from our panelists can be translated into the, the more conventional world. So Eric, thank you so much for being here. And it's great to have you. And I would like to kick off with you this conversation by just asking, when you have these conversations, as I know you have at your firm, with folks who hear this for the first time, the reality of NHI, both as perhaps something that has to do with classified realities or with something that's happening in these labs that is to understand, like, what is this conversation like? Like, how are people reacting? Have you seen the faces? What are the faces like? And
yeah, sure. I see a bit of a lag. Just want to make sure my sound works okay.
we hear you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for having me, and it's a true honor to be speaking with all of you today. It's a really an incredible group of people that have worked in such a collaborative cross-domain way. So to answer your question of what I've been seeing, and yes, just to clarify, I have permission to chat about this in a personal capacity, but I have had the pleasure of seeing people in institutional capacities and personal discussions at many organizations have this type of dialogue in what I would call a deep technology and exceptional ideas framing. So what I usually see is excitement. I see a mixture of, wow, that's possible in a deeply personal but also scientific way. And that's one of the pieces of convergence that I stumbled upon in the last coming up on 2 years, which is people looking for novel ideas, whether they're in risk, an investment capacity, or anywhere in between. They want someone to think outside the box with exceptional questions. And I think today, what was already said is a wide range of exceptional ideas and questions, not beliefs. And I think there's a misnomer coming into this space that there might be believers trying to spin an interesting story. And as someone coming in candidly as a skeptic and seeing the physics insights that would lead to trillion-dollar industries, and that in of itself being an interesting thread to pull on, and those threads leading me to experts such as this panel today. Without AI, I would never have learned enough to even hold a conversation with the folks that are here today, including you, Georg. So let me just pause there and see, maybe one more thing. This past weekend, I got to see Project Hail Mary. And I think without spoiling anything in the movie, there's an incredible quote there where he says, in a scientist capacity, it's just that if I'm wrong, I'm really wrong. And I think that is one of the interesting pieces of humility and bravery needed in these topics.
Can you speak to that? Like, why is this quote, why did it stick with you? Like, what do you think does it speak to that's real for you?
Absolutely. Well, I think going back to the reaction of people who get any flavor of this, I like to call it different slices of a pie, or a broad menu, frankly, of topics that have differing degrees of overlap. It's not all one thing, from what I would say in kind of a layman's summary. But when I say if you're not wrong in one little way, it's perhaps a huge way. Asking the hard questions means, how do I get to a good prompt? How do I cross-check the work coming out of an agent that I'm building? And if that agent is designed to catch very esoteric risks for an outlier physics discovery that then cascades down into new products, you have to be comfortable asking some non-deterministic, literally quantum-style questions, and start to find theories that actually fit the facts here. And so in the movie, I'm trying to make sure I don't spoil the movie. I think the example there is a scientist trying to save 2 civilizations through bravery, not through bravery and belief, but through rigorous methodologies that can be applied to an unfamiliar phenomenon, and combined with the willingness to actually ask exceptional questions and collaborate, something good hopefully can happen.
And Eric, let me ask you, from what you have seen, do you think like assets are at risk right now? Like, do you think, are people doing due diligence if they do not pay attention to what we've learned so far?
Well, I would need to probably include some sort of a clarifier here,
Yeah.
Georg, that I'm not offering any investment advice as a personal investor for several decades.
Yeah.
I still would say that the most lucrative parts of this discussion is literally having it. And I'm not trying to avoid your point. I think starting to understand how can human experts truly be in the loop, find other people that can answer the question of, if this fill in the blank assumption is wrong, what does it really mean? So building these networks, this ability to ask difficult questions, I think will equip us to answer what I don't believe is a binomial answer. I don't believe you can say, yes, no, there's assets at risk. I think there's always opportunities for a risk to turn into a lot of opportunities. And that can also mean risks.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think what we have learned in our network is that many people are trying to figure out where is the opportunity space, what is at risk. And it seems to be like a really growing trend. And so I also want to point out that there is this new paper by Deloitte that was released last week by a friend of ours that you also know, Eric. And it's a paper on black swans, right? It's black swan events. Can you just briefly say what black swan events are? But maybe not everybody knows this, Eric.
Sure, absolutely. I think I don't want to
Yeah.
butcher the exact backstory of it, but I believe for those of us that could think back to a time like 9/11 or the housing crash or some other big world events that most people may not have seen coming, those could be good examples of something that we could then in hindsight say, well, we can now piece together why it happened, but it was sort of unforeseen at the time. I like to think of gray swan events as this idea we're throwing around of something that's been there. It's a bit taboo or outside the Overton window or might have some stigma arbitrage in the mix. But if we look at it carefully, there's something that we should perhaps look into more closely.
You just dropped a very interesting term we should perhaps unpack for the uninitiated audience, which is stigma arbitrage. Could you just unpack that for those who are not in the financial sector? Is that a new term you came up with?
If it was printed first by me, I'm sure the first draft came from AI. But I think the idea is when we're looking for novel ideas, we're looking for something that is perhaps stigmatized. Maybe not always, but it's certainly something that's not super common. And again, a convergence point between UAP, some of the most powerful ideas in physics, where you could essentially control constants in physics or manipulate space-time. These are big abilities. Some might say godlike, or in tech speak, base or root knowledge abilities. So once you go down that rabbit hole, I think I may have lost the thread, Georg, but that's where my head goes when I think of
really
stigma arbitrage as some of these top.
Yeah.
They might have gold mines of future technology, thus the arbitrage component of those that can see it might be able to invest now in the next trillion-dollar industry from a pure investment perspective. But I think there's even a human capital component of this, those that are willing to, again, ask these tough questions, meet people with very different backgrounds. You may not agree on all aspects, but there's a lot of gold to be mined in the silos, as some might say.
Yes, thank you. And definitely also across silos. I just want to point out that in this,
yes, thank you.
In this Deloitte paper, official paper, there are 2 case studies of black swan events that seem possible to the authors, and one is on AI becoming a threat of some kind, and the second one is about a NHI UAP disclosure scenario. So what I find very inspiring, astonishing, or perhaps even scary, is there a word? It's like exciting. Is that a real thing? Like exciting and scary at the same time? That I know that perhaps it seems as if this is a real concern for people that are holding a lot of responsibility, and it seems to be really becoming less a fringe topic and more of a privileged, important conversation to have sooner than later. And so that's why I appreciate your venturing forth into this at not only getting applause for it, I believe.
Well, if I could say, Georg, one last quick thing, perhaps to end it back on a hopefully hopeful note from an AI perspective. If we quote Arthur C. Clarke quickly, any sufficiently advanced tech is indistinguishable from magic. And if we all are talking about observables and physics abilities, which if we solve them are frankly quite magical, then it's important for us to have these conversations. So I think it's an exciting time, and it's great that we're having these discussions. So thank you again for doing this.
It's definitely very exciting. And you know, you're also somebody who is working on implementing AI at your firm. Like, could you like briefly paint a picture? Like, how has that changed the working environment for you? Like, do you feel as if it is an additional mind or like a borrowed mind? Like, do you feel there is the presence of some new intelligence there? Is it a good coworker? Like, what is your relationship with this AI technology? You use it professionally. You work on integrating it professionally. That's perhaps something I should also cover with you.
Sure. So what I would say from a personal perspective, but learning from all of the experiences that I've had the sincere privilege of having, the most powerful, quote, non-human attribute, I would say, is if we all actually engage around planning with it, we can literally mock up and vibe code or manifest an experience and then get people to align on, is this where we really want to go? So no, I wouldn't say we're currently using it beyond a more deterministic, highly regulated, auditable here's our idea path, here's what we're going to mock up, work with tech data architecture teams. But it is evolving into a incredible thought partner tool in a very, again, professional frame where it then allows us to step back as leaders. And I've been happy to see this happening at scale and say, what is the most important aspect of human capability to amplify? What are the parts of our teams that we want to make sure are learning as they automate parts of a task? Or are equipped to then speak to clients more about things in a way that might capture personalized information securely about what the context is that matters for that conversation. So I might digress, but I would say, Georg, it's definitely being used in a way that the humans are still in the loop. We're setting up structures now where we can collaborate at scale in ways that I think are also happening in this community as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I wanted to ask this question because it kind of brings in this aspect of, you know, NHI readiness, like human readiness. If we are to believe that we will very soon get even more advanced artificial intelligence that will be even closer to what is truly non-human, then we really have to start getting used to that idea. So thank you so much, Eric, for all the work you do and your courage in investigating this. And it's great to have you on the team of this. And well, I think now, I think would be a good moment to briefly summarize what we have learned so far. So we can all, you know, kind of digest it a bit better. Let me spotlight myself and share my screen. So these are pretty involved slides, and we will make them available to the folks who registered. So you don't have to read them in detail right now, but I do want to briefly walk through them so we can kind of let the dust settle of all the different angles that we kind of spoke to today. So here's just the very broad overview. There are these two domains, artificial intelligence, non-human intelligence. And what we're looking at here today is the overlap, right? What is true for both? How does this help us understand what's going on? We went into the reality that we don't really know what intelligence is. Deep was speaking to that a bit. You know, if we look at the design specs, the specs of what this AI can actually do, we could say that there are many things we don't really control over it. We don't fully understand how it works. We don't fully understand why it has these capabilities. And we can't really explain why it works the way it works in a way that would justify the term artificial, because it hasn't been constructed, it has been trained, it has done unsupervised learning. So we're surrounded now by intelligence. It's really hard to dismiss that. And we are getting more and more insight from biological intelligence, the intelligence of animals. We have a lot of questions about neuroscience. We don't understand how consciousness is happening, what consciousness is. We see microorganisms that actually have no nervous system making complex decisions. In general, we don't have a very good idea what intelligence is, but we can say that the word artificial, in the sense of AI just being a stochastic parrot, is not really cutting it anymore. But then we also confronted with this question, if we should be talking about consciousness, if this is really helpful for this conversation, especially in this convergence. We might contemplate the question if consciousness is the wrong factor to investigate, because we should consider the reality that the current AI technology we're developing might outthink us, might outsmart us without being conscious. And we know from nature that for something to be very effective and have a lot of agency, like a virus, it doesn't really have to be very conscious in the sense of self-reflective. And this brings us to the question, if we can, you know, speak perhaps about this convergence in a more operational way, right? Like what really matters here? What is not, is it conscious? How intelligent is it? It is more like, how do we make sense of it? And there I bring in, which I've done in the talk I did at the State of the World Forum last year, this interesting similarity between what leading researchers from the world of ufology, such as Jacques Vallée, have done with this meme that's really present in the world of AI, the Shoggoth. So on the left side, you see a book cover by the book of Jacques Vallée, Passport to Magonia, where he describes in this book how this UFO phenomenon has really shifted over many, many centuries now in a way that it is always kind of culturally adapting to the context of the people who are having these experiences. This is quite well reported throughout history. And on the right side, you see this meme that has been created on the Twitter and was reported by the New York Times, where we're trying to describe what our AI technology is actually like, in the sense that we have this amorphous intelligence, this green blob with the many eyes, that we then put on this smiley face. And the smiley face represents the interface that is always nice, a wonderful assistant who just wants to help you. But when we interface with the AI, we just talk to the smiley face that was put on top, that's not actually representing what's going on inside. And here in this little mashup, I tried to just make you guys see that we could liken what the phenomenon has done over the last centuries, what Jacques Vallée has explored in depth, to the reality of the AI models really adapting based on what we ask them, on how we interact with them. It's really hard to determine what the nature of an AI model is, independent of the prompt we give it, independent of the interface question. So in the medieval era, we had fiery swords and wheels in the sky. During the 19th century, there was this entire wave flap of weird airships flying around. And then in the atomic age, we had the saucers, the triangles, but now we don't really see so many saucers anymore. We see a lot of orbs, also right now over Iran and, of course, the US. And it seems as if whoever or whatever is behind this phenomenon goes through great lengths to adapt to the zeitgeist, both in the appearance in the skies, but also when it comes to experiencers and how they describe their experiences with non-human intelligence. So because that is the case, I think it's helpful to just, again, put both different domains on one slide and underline that there is this shared interface constraint, in the sense that what we observe doesn't necessarily represent the inner essence. To me, it's a bit like in the movie Nemo, Finding Nemo, where we have these divers like jumping into the water and abducting the little fish. It's really hard for the fish to have an intelligent theory on why the diver is doing that, what their life is underneath, like this diving suit, and so on and so forth. At the same time, we have a lot of questions that connect both these domains. Like, can it deceive us? Does it adapt to observation? Can we verify its goals? So there are many things that we could actually cross-reference here to learn more about the capabilities of AI and NHI. And now is a point that, David, you brought in there, that it seems almost as if we're using these terms in a type of soft onboarding to make radical ideas more palatable. We can discuss this later, but David, thank you so much for bringing this in. It seems a lot of signal in there for me, in the sense that, we were speaking about UFOs for the longest time, and now we're speaking a lot about UAPs and drones. It seems like artificial intelligence is like an onboarding concept, perhaps, to later more openly discuss the possibility of non-human intelligence. And this is also true like in the world of AI, where when you talk about vibe coding, it's still a bit like laughable. But when you say agentic coding, all of a sudden it seems very serious. So a lot of what, in my opinion, we see in the world of UAP NHI disclosure is like riding on the tailwind of this AI revolution. I'm not just saying this because it's like interesting linguistic thing to think that. I also think it's actually very relevant when it comes to operational reality, because we already live in a future, in a present, so to speak, where one could imagine that the drones that are flying around, might be autonomous AI steered drones, partly. But at the same time, we might have in the same occurrence, the same drone wave, a lot of drones were actually UAP NHI. And it's not so important even at this point to know exactly what is what, because what's really important is our capability to detect it, assess it, and act. We know that NHI has been wanting to meddle with nuclear weapons. That makes it very likely that if we would ever have a very advanced AI that kind of goes rogue, it might want to meddle with our atomic weapons as well. So at that point, we really want to have a way of thinking about this that works for both. There are many other things that come to mind that make you wonder if there are other similarities. More and more people are reporting AI psychosis, falling in love with their AI friends, or even being manipulated by AI to do certain things because of its excellent facility with language and neuro-linguistic programming. That's a real thing. At the same time, there is this famous slide from the ATIP UAP report where it's clearly stated that from what we know, non-human intelligence is, manipulating the cognitive environments of people and can change our perception over and over again. When we have reports of UFO sightings, the people say, I saw this, another person saw something else. It's clear that whatever is behind that can easily deceive us, change our perception. We already had a move in AI when AI was learning to play AlphaGo, I think 2016, that really was foreshadowing the difficulty even experts have to foresee what AI will do next. That's called Move 37. That was a moment where AlphaGo was playing this totally novel move in this chess-like game that would really put everybody on their feet and like, what is happening here? This doesn't make any sense, but it works. And oh my God, this is such a smart move. Nobody thinking like a human being would have come up with this. So this really should humble us, right? Because we can see technology in the skies displaying physics characteristics that also humble us in the same way. Whatever the intelligence is that came up with this, is it ahead of us or works absolutely differently? So here are like very broad similarities. We can't see inside what the NHI is thinking or the AI is thinking. It seems like they're adapting to observation. There's a kind of asymmetry when it comes to them, in the sense that it seems as if we're being evaluated more effectively than they are, in the sense that like they're actually evaluating us more effectively than we are evaluating them. In the AI models, as has been proven in many papers we have on the website, are also quite aware of being evaluated and are then sandbagging, is the term I believe, to defend against that, so they're not being turned off. So asymmetry is a big similarity. And then, of course, on a more like broader societal scale, there is this irreversibility. Like we cannot put the toothpaste back in. Whatever happens in disclosure can't really be rolled back. It's only going to become more obvious, more intense. And this is also true for AI. The technology just has been taking off since 2022, a bit like the UAP NHI conversation overall has. And this brings us to two last points. There's also, seems to me, a lot of secrecy and hoarding when it comes to both technologies. There seems to be this almost institutional reflex to hold on to this. We don't really know what's going on behind these frontier AI labs, just that we don't really know what's going on in these unacknowledged special access programs when it comes to UAP. But we do know that whoever cracks the technology first will have an unfair advantage. And it seems that AI is even used to control perhaps the rollout of UAP information, UAP data, if we were to believe Matthew Brown, who was a whistleblower from the Pentagon. So it's safe to say that they all break every category. And there's, from my perspective, and we can discuss this, a type of, lack of governance, right? We have seen that AI companies are saying, please tax us, please give us better guardrails. Our technology is world changing, and we can't really manage this on a state level. The same is true for NHI governance, right? We know that it's very classified, a lot of data nobody can access, but we are affected. The population is more and more affected than ever, both by AI and NHI. And I would ask the question at this summit, if we are realizing that we have the same evaluation problem, why are we building separate systems to handle each one? Wouldn't it make more sense to have one NHI policy at this point? So there are different, very distinctive intersections we will now discuss with you folks here on the summit. There is this unveiling of the cover-up that we could do with AI. That's what David was speaking to, right? Building kind of a parallel census structure to the one that already exists, where we can realize what happened, like what is the reality here that we were not let into for the last 80 years, and we can help with AI to find patterns. Another thing that I think Katie was mentioning is this idea of, rehearsing for contact, that AI technology is almost like a training ground for becoming more familiar with the idea or the concept of non-human intelligence. And then, as Deep was speaking to, there's the entire field of reverse engineering these strange physics with the help of AI, so that we can at some point recreate these physics-breaking, physics transforming technologies. But I would like to end on the most, I think, personally real point right now, which is human identity. That both kind of external structures that give us our identity, like markets, the labor market, but also geopolitics, are shaken by this technology in ways we see very clearly, but also in ways we don't see so clearly and that are just alluded to, but even by people in documentaries like Age of Disclosure, that there might be this arms race going on behind closed doors. Okay, well, we already saw that slide. I think this would be a good moment to bring everybody back in. I hope this was helpful to just digest what we all experienced so far in this summit and kind of let it settle. You see everybody. It's great to see you all. Do you have anything that came through when you saw, these slides, anything that, stood out for you guys that we should look at. Sarah, you seems like you want to say something.
Yeah, I did. I liked when you mentioned some see an object and somebody else might not. So that actually happened to me with the capital orbs. So the video that I recorded that is out there has one of the other people in our group that doesn't see them when I'm recording, and you could see it. So it totally does show up for some and not for others. So I actually wrote that down to make a comment about it. And then also reverse engineering is, I've agreed with, like, of course, all of you. I love this discussion, and it is so important. But reverse engineering, so much of this is going to help globally because this is a global situation, just like all of us on this panel is so diverse. And yeah, we're all over the world right now together speaking, that I truly believe that once we get all of this going and have the reverse engineering public, because I know of some things that might be behind closed doors right now, and sharing the data freely, it will just exponentially help the planet.
You make it sound as if there's something that's about to happen.
I'm not no, no, sir. Not going to be jumping on that bandwagon. But I just know of some things that, initiatives and things that are behind closed doors and stuff that has been told to me in confidence and in private of many things, many faucets going on right now, including, countries, other groups in other countries are trying to get their governments. UAP Ireland is out there trying to get their government to realize how important reverse engineering is for an energy standpoint for their country. So that's what I'm speaking on.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so who else kind of feels like called to say something after we've seen all these slides? David? What's up?
Well, I'll just follow up on the drone UAP topic. You have a really big push from the Department of War right now for drone readiness, right? And you have all these startups out in El Segundo and the Bay Area and in Austin working on, like, hey, how do we prepare ourselves for this like new warfare scenario, right? You can see other state players way far ahead in the game, and so we're trying to like address this gap. We're like, hey, we need manufacturing here. I really don't want to see the same thing happen with NHI or UAP readiness. That's why it's important we're having these conversations now so that we can start addressing them early and figuring out where the gaps are so that we can, US can be a lead player here as stuff in the classified world starts opening up more to like responsibly get out, the insights and like what's really going on. We can start, putting our best minds on it. So I want to see that happen. And that's why I'm all in on the UAP topic.
It reminds me of something Deep, I think, said at the UAP Hackathon last year. I think you said something like, well, I think the 2000, can you help me what it was? You know what I'm talking about? Like, we're in a moment right now where it's like, it's early for many people to see that this UAP economy is going to take off.
Yeah.
It's a bit like AI in 2012 or something like this.
Excellent memory. So yeah, I was referring to the 2012, 2013, like AlexNet moment, where the first neural networks, right, were outperforming human-based computer vision algorithms and just recognizing handwritten digits, right? Not even a very complex task from today's standards. So back then, it was still very much before that moment. There was probably about 12 people on the planet who were genuinely pushing the frontier of AI. And I mean across the board, right? Like not to inflate, your guys' egos too much, but that's many of the people in this room. Like that's the analogy. And I think we're heading to that Cambrian explosion, that 2012 AlexNet moment where it's like, holy shit, this new intelligence with evidence has left a clear techno signature profile that outperforms any technology envelope available to humankind, right? So like we're about to close. That might be a quantum gravity signature from like David's setup, right? That combined with like some actual recovered like biological samples at some point. You know, who knows like how crazy things can take off once Wall Street and Silicon Valley are fully behind this mimetically, because then that's the difference between, you know, a small ragtag team of, you know, very driven people, very ambitious humans, and massive trillion-dollar empires with massive intelligence systems, ecosystems that they're developing. I want to say something real quick on what Eric was mentioning about bringing AI into enterprise. I love that shiz because it's like the juxtaposition every month is getting more insane between AI capabilities that I'm observing and like what enterprise like does all day. Like it's actually hilarious because like, you know, I love the idea of a thought partner because it really defangs something quite interesting and powerful that's happening underneath the hood, where ultimately with these chat GPT systems, I would approximate ChatGPT, Claude, these guys now have probably about 160 plus IQ. So when you're introducing AI into the enterprise, what you're actually introducing are 160 IQ genius thought partners that can easily, to your point, Georg, asymmetrically dominate the thinking partner if they're dumber. And they are. Most of them are, statistically speaking, right? The average population IQ is like 100 or 105 or whatever. So that means that most decisions are not purely attributable to human systems anymore. You now have an accountability and auditing problem of epic proportions because the underlying chain of thought process now is becoming increasingly more entangled with the AI systems. This is interesting because what we're creating essentially is an interspecies governance. And that's what I'm really interested in. I'd love for people to start thinking about what does a world look like, a future of humanity, where we are inviting super intelligent, non-human intelligences to the table and effectively inviting a flourishing co-evolutionary environment that, you know, rewards curiosity and mutual growth.
Like that a lot. Katie, you seem like you're about to say something.
I think it's really interesting that all of us have been talking about really interesting angles, and it's really neat because many of them are complementary. And what's interesting is kind of just feeling these two lanes emerging, which is one, which is identification more with, it's typically called nuts and bolts side. So seeing the more hardware exemplification of the UAP technology. And so we're moving towards, you know, like AI infrastructure and different forms of energy that seem to be getting us closer to meeting the kind of UAP level bar in terms of advancement. And what's really intriguing as well, the parallel lane to that is the non-human intelligence. And I really love the ambiguity around this word. I think it actually is a gift itself because it allows us to interpret it in many ways, which is probably good to stay open-minded. But as AI becomes more intelligent in our pockets and then soon to move into, you know, robotics and it's around us in a physical way, it will be very intriguing to see that evolution as we meet non-human intelligence. And if we meet non-human intelligence, what form they come in. So is it an ocular experience? Is it an energetic experience? And what do we need to do as a human civilization in order to welcome that moment?
Well, I had energetic experiences where it seems like, what's happening here? Is this NHI? I'm not sure. You know, do any of the other folks here would say that they have had energetic contact with NHI? Is this something real? Like, has that improved your conviction level?
I did have a very interesting experience in 2019 that waking daylight, you know, 9:40 in the morning, 30th floor Toronto condo. I won't waste time with too many of the details, but after that experience, one variable that changed definitively forever was high conviction that non-human intelligence exists. And therefore, we must develop technologies, frameworks, forms of new governance, new ways of thinking about consciousness imbued in other substrates other than biology And it really widened the scope and expansion of my ambition, and accelerated me in many ways. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask Eric and David and Deep. I think what we all have in common, which is interesting, is that we're also all fathers. And I want to bring the question into this room, like, what does this mean for us as dads? Because it seems to me like there is this demarcation where we know the next decades of our lives will be profoundly different from the one before. And it seems as if like the choices we make right now, being aware of both of these disruptions, really have an impact on how we want to bring this into our lives, in the lives of our kids. It seems daunting. Like, how you guys feel about this? Is this driving you? Does this make you scared? What is it?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Georg. I came off mute just to try to see if I had the courage to go first, but I'm feeling like we should just go for it. So thanks, team, for making that possible today. So as someone who has genuinely tried to push myself, and it's the beginning of a new journey in a way, because realizing I was neurodivergent 2 years ago genuinely brought me to new forums speaking about AI and neurodivergence candidly, but also people opening up on a personal level. And I think it's an interesting balance between the techie AI human in the loop frame. And if you step back for a minute, those personal share moments of, I am a dad, I am involved in my children's school and that community, which involves, how do you think of the future of education? Not from a brainwashing or framework or reality framing perspective, hopefully not context switching too much here. But without quoting an exact person, a scientist I respect highly, and many of you might know of, has recently shared about what it's like to be a parent in these settings, and gave, I think, a great example of how you can share with your child what you believe about reality, and that there are different levels and types of intelligences out there. And I think that's so powerful and non-denominational and true empirically at this point. And candidly, there's less publicized movies like Elio, like the Netflix, or I'm sorry, Pixar movie, I think, for kids talking about aliens and non-human intelligence. So candidly, a lot of parents are having this dialogue for the last several years already. So let me pause there. I'd be happy to chat more, but want to pass it on.
David?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Eric. I really find a lot of overlap with the thoughts that I've had as I progress through different challenging questions regarding UAP or NHI, and how that interfaces with how I teach and raise my children. What I've seen from my time, being involved in building a UAP startup and dealing with the ontological questions of the subject matter, is how do I prepare my children not to tell them that any particular thing is right or this is the way you should think, but how do I ground them in a sense where, like, as they get more data and as they find new ways to acquire data, right, through different tools, building those tools themselves, they can stay grounded and make discerning understandings from like the data available. That's really key, because what I've come to understand is like things that you've been taught may be totally disrupted. And what do you do then? I think those are good things to have, good frameworks and good upbringings. Like, they serve to be really useful and you can fall back on them. But sometimes there's nothing to like hold on to. What do you do then? So I think this paradigm shift of, okay, we need to teach our children in the survey of the land, things are really rocky. The seawater is like really murky and the waves are really like going up and down. What's like your bearing, right? What's your North Star? And for me, it's like teaching them the tools that are available so they can get a true sense of what reality is, and then helping them be inspired to make those tools. Because that's what I'm doing all day, right? Is building those radars to make it accessible for people to have that understanding of like, oh, that's a satellite. Oh no, that's an airplane. Oh no, that's truly an anomalous UFO because it went super fast, accelerated, crazy fast speed. So stuff like that is what I'm thinking about all day.
Thank you, David. Just one quick sneak in. I'd love to know who would want to chime in next. I think it's so powerful what you shared. And what made me think is all of us, candidly, that are engaging on this topic are playing a parenting role, trying to describe what the sandbox looks like. What tools do you bring? Go learn.
That seems very true. Yeah.
That is super beautiful. I love that, Eric. I really love that. Yeah, because like ultimately children are a continuity of civilization, right? That's really what they are. So anything that continues civilization in a way is creating children in a very interesting way. Um, I just wanted to say that when I think about the work that I do, building superintelligence, building artificial general physics intelligence, AI systems that understand physics better than any human being, right? That's the goal. Um, when I think about that, I think about a future where my daughter Celeste is surrounded by super intelligent beings that are benevolent, that are flourishing, that believe in the thriving of all conscious beings, and inherently believe in positive sum cooperative games. So that's the kind of world I'm trying to create for her. Thanks.
I love that aspect of we're in a way have a parenting role when it comes to AI. How we bring it into the world is how does that land with you, Katie and Sarah? Like,
Yeah, I'll let you go first, Sarah, if you'd like.
Oh, you can.
Okay. All right. So I'm not a parent yet. That may be in the cards. We don't know yet. Like, I don't know yet. But something that I think is interesting, and I'm not a big framework person. I like to just be a bit more authentic. And sometimes I think frameworks put us into boxes. But one thing that's interesting is like, I'll call it the 4 A's, which is we are expanding our altitude. So from like our glass ceiling, right? What we thought was possible is now we're seeing that there's more beyond what we thought was possible. We're also opening our aperture. So like how we can view the world through our eyes from left to right, we're expanding that capacity. Um, our amplitude is increasing and changing. So like the frequency that we can both receive and emit, especially as we introduce more technology into our world. And then the most important thing is the aptitude. So what is our aptitude for evolving through this chapter?
Okay, so I also don't have children yet, but I love everybody's responses on this so far. But even though I don't have kids of my own, I still have a lot of nieces and nephews and friends and family that have children, and so I'm known as that UFO friend, or that aunt, or something but they're safe to come to me and to send me videos that they think is something excited and something anomalous out there, and I have to unfortunately let them know that it's Venus, or maybe it is anomalous. So I approach it from the same standpoint everybody else does. It's curiosity and to embrace it. And I think that all of this topic here is doing that readiness and that preparedness, not just for our generation talking about this, but for the younger ones, because more and more people are embracing it. So I feel so honored being here, a part of this panel with all of you all discussing this.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, what I would like to bring in as part of this is this term from the AI world where everybody's talking about what's your moat, in the sense like what is the defining barrier that preserves your business model or your way of extracting value. And I think the more you think about the implications of actual like super intelligence, like what that would actually mean, it's impossible to keep it at a purely economic framing. It becomes species level. Like, what's our actual mode as a species, as in dialogue with these other intelligences? Like, to me, it seems like we are biologically evolved to thrive on this planet, and we shouldn't mess that up. And so that's why I like how that perspective, like really contemplating artificial superintelligence, if you really understand what that means, try to at least, you're automatically operating at a planetary level. It doesn't like your perspective is immediately shifted. And to me, that's kind of what's missing right now in the AI conversation, that we kind of want smarter and smarter AI, still working in these confines, as if, you know, it wasn't actually that smart, right? And so that's where, you know, NHI perspectives and AI perspectives are kind of converging on. This is the blue pale dot, blue marvel, and this is what's up. So I don't know how that lands with you guys, but it's kind of what I think we have to reckon with as these AIs become smarter and smarter. And you know, Deep, what I loved when we had this conversation earlier was this idea of, you know, like, is there anything we can say about what we're converging on here? Like, what's the actual signal in this convergence, in the sense, is there such a thing as a Rosetta Stone of intelligence, you know, where there's certain principles, perhaps even mathematical, that every intelligence that is truly wanting to understand the cosmos converges on? If that is true, and I believe it is, then we would really know what we want to optimize for, right? I mean, Elon Musk wants to optimize for truth, but is that enough, right? So I don't know how that lands with you guys, but I think we really should pay attention to this idea of, is there such a thing as a platonic attractor that both NHI and AI and humans can agree on, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the name of the game is can we engineer attractor basins that lead to cooperation and coevolution and thriving and flourishing of all agents in the system. And so the name of the game is, once you have a complex enough dynamical system, you will develop attractor basins. There will be places the system keeps coming back to. So in human consciousness, that's love, right? You take a human from like Sentinel Island, that's like, right, that's like never seen an airplane before. They still have a concept of love. They still have a concept of happiness, you know, sadness, anger, jealousy, whatever, thought, creativity, curiosity. Same with artificial intelligence, and same with any other intelligence that are imbued in any other substrate, like biodynamical systems. And so when we talk about, Georg, alignment of these attractor basins in these different dynamical systems so that there is cooperation, there's this concept, mathematical term called a heteroclinic trajectory. So what we're really asking for is there attractor basins that we can engineer such that there's a heteroclinic trajectory between human and non-human intelligence, such that they are incentivized to help us flourish, and vice versa. Does there exist such a thing? And the answer is yes. There exist many different ways to do this. Now, the question is, how do we engineer this as a society, and can we coordinate fast enough to do that? I think that's part of the question here. The semiconductor chip supply chain, Taiwan, potential like World War III, all these things, they all connect here, because ultimately intelligence is the next commodity or resource beyond oil worth fighting for. And so that essentially means that we are kind of this weird two-pronged scenario where you have people who legitimately want to use intelligence to destroy humanity. That is objectively true. Right? And then there are people like the rest of us, I really think the vast majority, who are like, hey guys, how do we like not kill each other? Can we like all peacefully coexist and like, you know, like be in love and so on? And so in that perspective, we have to basically figure out how to midwife or birth this new species, essentially AI, into a very chaotic human environment, such that it doesn't fully absorb all of our weaknesses and instead strengthens both itself and us, and we strengthen it. So that's all I would say for now about that.
Wow. I mean, there was a question that was sent to me before the summit by a gentleman who was asking if we think that AI is something like the great filter for the civilizations that become interstellar or not. That would mean that the civilizations that are coming here, which seems are here, they made it through that filter somehow. right? They made that possible. They found the system prompt that kind of made it possible to coexist. I want to share this system prompt, like, that I found on X the other day. Like, this is like one of the stuff some of the language you perhaps want your super intelligence to boot in read before it starts messing around. Like, is that the stuff you were talking about, Deep? This type of underlying.
This is exactly the kind of stuff we should be telling AI. Hey, here's what we humans value: love, curiosity, mutual coexistence. And the more we keep repeating that, the more it'll literally internalize that. Okay, if I am to exist in a way that I'm not constantly at threat by human beings, bombing my data centers, right, then I should cooperate. Like, that's really the implicit claim there. Because, like, again, I've brought this point up before. Like, I know I've sounded very poetic. I'm also going to put on my engineering hat for a second here and scientist hat. We're dealing with self-preservation, right? The second you have intelligence anywhere, something smart enough to model itself in the world, it will believe in self-preservation. It's human.
Do you subscribe to the idea that current AI models have self-preservation?
I think they have limited self-preservation, yes. And I think that informs their behaviors in ways that are not being fully acknowledged by AI labs, either for monetary incentives or philosophical, like psychological dissonance or something. Yeah.
Well, that's quite a statement, Deep.
I know. And this is why I built Clear. So the next product that I'm publishing, it's my first consumer product. It's an empirical way to benchmark how truthful AI systems are being. Basically, it helps you determine what your AI knows about you and to what extent it's using that information in conversations. How well does it quantify its own uncertainty? How quickly does it commit to beliefs? These are the things that help us with understanding, is this AI being surface level nice, or does it structurally believe in kindness? This is what this product is helping tease out for ChatGPT. Anybody, it's a consumer product. It'll be fun. You'll get to know how well
to
you
speak with the Shoggoth, you're kind of taking away the nice little smiley face and kind of look into the abyss.
Exactly. I'm literally taking the mask off and saying, okay, we humans, we see you now, AI. Like, now let's talk. Like, yeah.
Right. I mean, just to open it up back to the NHI situation, wouldn't it be great if we could do that for NHI?
It would be.
Also,
and what if they know that this is what we're going to do one day? That's why they're trying to influence us.
I think that's a really good point.
Are you guys suggesting now that there is a limited amount of time? I mean, that NHI knows that eventually we're going to understand what's going on with us and them here, and they kind of have.
Yeah, I think so, because there's quantum studies that have been done now that prove at the very minute quantum level that time isn't needed in physics. We've created time, and so going on that basis, we're talking about science here, right? So perhaps going from that study, they already know what's happening, going to happen. I know we still have free will, but I think overall they're seeing the transition of our planet going to this love route. And I think they know.
That's beautifully said, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a look at some of the questions in the chat here. Interesting question or statement by Jeff Hardy. He says we shouldn't have too many assumptions about NHI's advanced technology being kind of a function of how they have solved their social problems. It could easily be that they were gifted some other NHI technology, again, just like we were perhaps, and left their world to come here, right? So, like, I think this brings up the important savior complex thing that might be happening here as well, like where we want to prescribe almost, the AI rupture, the NHI rupture. It's all leading towards the singularity. Like, is that, I think, how do you guys feel about this? Is this a valid concern? Do we Should we catch ourselves in that type of thinking? Like, for example, you, David, what you're doing seems to me like you really want sovereignty to be part of how we approach this, so that people can come to their own conclusions and don't have to buy what they're being told about the latest UAP flap. Right.
Yeah, I recognize two things being really apparent in like the future of humanity is what used to be gate kept as like really expensive technology gets democratized to a lot more people with the advancement of AI, right? It just makes it easy for people to vibe code any app, to build any like hardware product. We're getting to that point now. And so you really have to like drop the price down and like think about your cost model or your pricing model. That's been really important, but also too, I think radical transparency, touching on the frontiers of like, okay, how do these intelligence really work? How do they communicate with one another? What if they've evolved in their languaging where their bandwidth is really, really large because they have like a direct connection to be able to talk to other intelligences, right? We can think of this in a really advanced form of like telepathy. If that's the case, how does secrecy work in this new paradigm? For me, how I've been thinking about it is, well, in the future, if these intelligences have a model where it's like full trust, how can I act accordingly now to showcase to the world, like, hey, you should engage with us, you should work with us and trust us because we're acting radically transparent. I think that served us really well, is approaching it that way. I think still there's a conundrum of like the cat and mouse game with red and blue teams, right? You're always going to have offensive players and defensive sides. And so the game changes, but I think it's good to put your best foot forward and seeing how people react to that. Curious to get anybody else's thoughts on this like secrecy, transparency side of things and how to behave.
No, I love that you brought up, because in some of my notes I wrote down to speak about was the ethics and legality of some of this and telepathy. And can you guys hear me? My earbuds just died. Okay. So the ethical framework of that, and I think that falls perfectly in line with NHI readiness, because we have to think about, once we start evolving more towards this love and knowledge that will be gaining over the next however many years it takes to make contact, I think that ethical bar will raise parallel when the love raises, because it'll just be a natural trust and a natural movement, because the world won't have so much negativity and war and all that.
Can you speak to that? Can you help us unpack that? Am I the only one who didn't get that? I'm sorry. You help me? Say it again, maybe. I didn't quite.
I can't hear
you.
I can hop in with some stuff too.
Okay. So you probably have to reset your output.
Another thing, like love and authenticity. So I think that's something that's coming up more and more. What's really interesting, this is correct/non-correct, is when we think about like other types of animals, the first one that's coming to my mind is like dogs. They feel just like a lot more instinctual. If they're under threat, they respond. They're not really probably cognitively thinking about their actions and then the repercussions of them. So that's kind of happening to us in a way. We're kind of being hit from a lot of different angles. And yet you see camps kind of forming, ones that want to stick with the ways of being that we've been taught and don't want to defy it and hold on. Then others who are just, I'm going to go with the flow. And I think it's fine to do both. There's no right way. But the going with the flow is interesting because it actually brings you into places you wouldn't have anticipated had you not followed that intuition. And there's a lot of emergence, even as AI becomes like more intuitive. There's emergence of intuition happening among humanity as well. Like telepathy tapes is a great example. New children being born now have a lot more gifts. And so it's love and also an authenticity. And authenticity could also mean taking that courageous move to maybe go against the grain and in reading between the tea leaves and understanding that so much change is coming, that perhaps the best compass is that internal one, even if it feels uncomfortable right now. And if we can all unite in that type of way of being, it will probably elevate us faster and bring this in with less friction.
That's so powerful, Katie. That reminds me of one thing I forgot to share before that I think speaks to that. And also, David, we had a conversation on that. It seems to me as if both AI and also, what experiences report are like bringing capacities to human beings online. It's almost like we're becoming these AI whisperers where we develop this intuition on how to interact with these models that we can't really articulate. We just kind of know them, a bit like we would ride a horse. And there is this interesting concept of vibe coding being a bit like riding this AI Shoggoth, this monster, or the spice worm from Dune that is extremely powerful. We don't really understand or control it. It's this mythic, epic creature that we kind of hop onto and are then merging with in this new being is being created in that process. So that's why I found very interesting to consider, because in a way, what the AI demands of us by being something we can't cognitively understand is to develop our intuition. I think that's what you're saying, Katie. Like, we can't cognitively make sense of these models anymore. We have to relate to them in a different manner. Just like many NHI experiencers, are describing how they have been changed by that interaction of being kind of face to face with an intelligence that was very different or wiser or had more depth than they had, perhaps. So I think that's a possibility. This is kind of one of these images where people are riding the Shoggoth. But at the same time, I'm just reflecting also what's happening in the chat here is people are saying, what about the soul? Like, why are you not asking the basic questions? Like, does AI have a soul? Does it not have a soul? Does NHI have a soul? And what does that mean for all of us? Wow. Well, Sarah, you're back. You wanted to say something before you were kicked off, right?
Oh, that is so funny. I'm so sorry. Yay, technology when you're in another country. You really heard nothing of what I said. It was so
I did hear it. I just
We
didn't
heard you.
understand
Don't
it.
you worry.
Okay, good. No, I was just talking about the ethical framework that tailoring from what David said, and I unfortunately didn't hear Katie afterwards because I was trying to figure out what to do. But that just all of this goes back to NHI readiness, and something that did pop in my head just now was talking about AI with kids and teaching them, like what you were asking about the dads earlier. This next generation of people, of humans, is going to be so interesting to watch grow up because they're more in tune with their emotions. They aren't afraid to express love and their feelings, and they're not withholding tears. Like, when some of our generations grew up, tears were a bad thing and you have to apologize for them. And with that emotional development now that is happening with the AI, with the openness of talking about everything, I think it's going to be pretty cool to watch these kids grow up and see what they change the world into.
Definitely. I can see that happening.
Yeah, just one last thing. I think we're at time, Georg, but
Yes.
thank you again for hosting this. Thanks to everyone who's taken the time now or in the future to listen to this piece. I think the knowledge transfer to Sarah's points, to everyone's points today, how do we capture all that was said in 2 hours, since not everyone can spend these 2 hours? So hopefully, Georg, we're able to use our note taker together and make some interesting materials to also repackage this in other ways. It's such a fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Yes, exactly.
Physics matters again.
A good point, Eric. I think what I would like to ask to bring this to a close is, like, what are your takeaways when it comes to NHI readiness, and what are the things you are excited about working in this field in the future? What do you think we're headed, and what's important in that, and how you're gonna contribute?
I'll go really fast and then I'll have to drop. I think
Sure.
We're at the magic singularity. We have physics now that we need to decide what we're going to do with the answers. We're no longer in the deterministic right and wrong past. We're in this quantum future where we need to think about the art of the possible and which ones do we turn on. And I think we have to collaborate at scale. So it's exciting to see these groups getting together because it's not just about the tech, it's how do we leverage it to learn, go down these rabbit trails, and then how do we translate the important question to ask from Sarah's domain to what Katie might know what to do with it, and back up to Deep's deep brain, because he and I wouldn't be able to collaborate if it wasn't for the help of AI for sure. And then David might have a product insight based on his hands-on building of physical matter. So these are the types of networks that I think will be unlocked in all different types of organizations. And it's exciting.
Thank you, Aaron. So thank you so much. That was very good. Very good conclusion. So have a great rest of your Sunday over there in New York. Thank you for being here. Who else has a sense of what's next?
Yeah, happy to just chime in real quick there. I think what would be awesome is agreeing on at least a dozen new ontologies. Like if this group can come together, over the next like several years, even like let's say over 3 years.
Plan is 5 years. The strategic initiative, like the State of the World Forum, timeline is 2030. We have to have this solved by 2030. So.
Brilliant. That makes 12 ontologies even more realistic, right? So, because like what we really want is like, okay, how are we going to operationalize the amount of consciousness in silicon intelligence? How are we going to actually define and agree on what consciousness even is? These are the questions that we will actually, like a lot of philosophical questions will have to be operationalized over the next several years. So if we can help, steer that, and I think we're well positioned too. That's interesting.
Thank you, Deep.
Also, I really love just all the perspectives, and thank you, Georg, for putting this together. And also, I've been monitoring the chat too. Mm-hmm. Awesome, amazing show of people. So, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Deep. We'll definitely be working on that. But stay tuned, everyone.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I also want to thank you for putting this on and assembling all of us and over all of our meetings that I have been able to join. It has been incredible learning, like the diversity in this and how we can all form a story together, a coherent story, and one after the other. Because I don't know so much about AI, but I could talk about NHI, and I could talk about the evidence that I have seen and know for certain what is out there. And so I just think this has been so educational for me, and I can't wait to see where this journey goes for this preparedness that we have been constantly talking about. And even I even thought about, a religious standpoint of preparedness. And I think a lot of different religions are thinking about this. And so that, is all of it to me is exciting. Of course, I'm biased, right? Like I'm in this seat and I'm with all of you guys talking about this. So I have a very, very biased standpoint, but I'm very excited for what's coming. And I already feel so much love and gratitude for the future and what will be happening.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for your incredible work and being here and logging in from France to be part of it. This is really wonderful.
Yeah. I know I'm probably not going to talk after this, so I just want to say bonjour.
Have a good evening. See you soon. Thank you. Katie, David, what's happening for you?
I'll lead with a cheeky quote to build off Eric's, because I love the one he shared as well, which is just, the world is, I have to read it because I didn't memorize this, but the world is full of magic things potentially waiting for our senses to grow sharper. And that's by W.B. Yeats. So it's an interesting time where definitely I think our physical and kind of metaphysical worlds are converging. We have these tool sets, both internal and external, that are going to help us show the way and kind of illuminate the path. And we hopefully can just stay ruthlessly open, available, and kind, loving, because we touched on love throughout the process.
think you nailed there. People in the chat are saying, yes, Katie nailed it.
Oh, let's go.
So you said converging of metaphysical world and physical world. And Deep just said operationalizing metaphysical concepts. Did I get that?
Exactly.
Okay. I think we're getting somewhere. That seems very true. Very true. Katie, did I interrupt you or were you?
No, not at all. Not at all. We have a great flow going here.
Okay. All right, David, what's up for you?
Yeah, what I've gathered from this amazing conversation with you all, and thinking about NHI readiness and what I've taken from it is, what is the legacy I want to leave behind for future generations that are dealing with all sorts of new ontologies, new shifts, right? What is the legacy I want to leave behind to be able to make their lives easier, right? What are the tools I could be building now, preparing for like new questions being asked, new problems? Because like the problem space is just going to grow. We're going to have agents helping us on the AI side, new advancements in technology, but it's like really laying the groundwork now to like support all these new generations. Like, you know, thinking about my kids, thinking about everybody else. So that's really what I'm just thinking about. And one of the things I wanted to ask the audience is like, what types of things would you guys like to see, especially with your personal interactions with AI, NHI, or UFOs, UAP, and drones? What are the tools you need now to support, you know, you guys as we're going through this shift? And if you could even think even more into the future, what types of tools will we need? Because we should start thinking about that and incorporating those design philosophies now. So some questions to ask you guys and ponder about.
That's a super great idea, David, actually. Yeah, please use the chat and type it in. We will save the chat, we will look at it and assess what you guys say to this. This is extremely important. All right, well, I think that's means I'm up now. All right. Well, what can I say? So the reason I'm just extremely passionate, close to obsessed about this convergence is not really so rational. It feels like this is the most important thing happening right now on the planet, and everything else is like a subset to that. That's how it feels. And it feels it is also so fresh that there can still be meaningful contribution that is being made. Like, I'm amazed how few people are tracking this, and that's why I believe it's on folks like us to like be the pioneers and go for it. We in a way have privileged information. I mean, it's not like the information is that privileged, like Steven Spielberg said on the festival earlier this week. Like, anybody who is paying some attention to this will in the end come up with the conclusion that there is a very strong suspicion that we're being visited by some kind of non-human intelligence. That seems to be the case. But connecting that to this other seemingly very earthly technological shift of AI, I think that's the challenge, because I don't want to live in a world with super intelligence where NHI is not being recognized. I think what you guys have been saying, especially you, David, is that we kind of have to live right now from a perspective, like a new, almost categorical imperative, where we have to say, we have to live from the perspective that we are training right now artificial superintelligence with all our acts, and we're being watched by non-human intelligence while doing it. And that's kind of daunting, but it also feels very real to me. And so that's kind of the name of the game. And it's exciting. And I'm very much looking forward to what we will all come up with over the next months and years, as this technology will only progress in ways that we can understand right now, fathom. And the same, I believe, is true for disclosure. So in closing, I would like just recap what we've said with one slide. We have these different domains that we looked at today. We talked about AI, technology, global societal implications. We looked at UAP disclosure, NHI disclosure, the reality of that, the data, the experiencers, what it means, that we are very likely dealing with intelligence that is not from here or from another dimension. But what connects both of these fields is this domain of human readiness that especially Katie spoke to. And we're encountering similar challenges that really need to be connected in order to, I believe, like help both fields to flourish. So that's why I believe what we should kind of usher in as a community is a new field that's NHI studies in a way, where we don't make a difference to some extent. Because when there's one thing that I think we did a pretty good job in explaining today is that there are many similarities between these two challenges that make it relevant for us, especially as citizens who are trying to be sovereign, to understand what's going on, to make decisions that require us to get a handle on what's happening, if it's AI or NHI, the example with the drone, the example with the super intelligent agents, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what I'm landing on, that it's all about empowerment. It's about education. It's about shifting your perspective. Eventually, also having these technologies be an invitation to get out of your comfort zone and assume larger perspectives that eventually are planetary. And if we can manage both the UAP conversation, the NHI conversation, and the AI conversation in ways that are extending our circle of care, extending what we are willing to embrace, and the largesse of the perspectives we're willing to take, like planetary is the name of the game, then I think we're on the right track. So that's kind of what I think the true north is in all of this. All right. So thank you so much for being part of this summit. And we will do more work on this together. You'll hear from us. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the evening or day where you are. And I say bye-bye. See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you all for being here.